unconstitutional and struck it down in a unanimous decision in 2022. So this has already been decided on, already ruled on. Pierre Poilievre doesn't like the response of the court standing up for the charter, so he wants to work around it. And all of this because all these criminals must be getting out of jail and running rampant all over the streets of Canada, just destroying the lives of countless Canadians. There must be so many examples of this, right?
I'm Mr. Poilievre,
Yes.
3 Global News. Is there an example of when a mass murderer has been set free? Does the parole board not usually rule against that?
Well, the problem is that the ruling just happened in 2022. So the clock started ticking on these cases in that year. So what we will see is 25 years forward, these offenders will be eligible for parole.
Yes, the clock started ticking. So the ruling happened in 2022, as he said there. And since then, there, I guess, haven't been any examples of any of these terrible people being up for parole, because otherwise he would have mentioned how they were up and then they got released, just like Paul Bernardo, who was denied parole for a third time just late last year. He has no examples because there are no examples. This is an attempt to undermine the rights of all Canadians, a slippery slope to continuing to do that when there is absolutely no need for even this discussion, let alone, of course, actually doing this. I mean, if you look at the crime rate in Canada is down historically, yet at least a quarter of what Pierre Poilievre does on the campaign trail is talk about, it's just, crime is running rampant. Canada is just being destroyed by the lost liberal decade. What are you talking about? We already have laws that exist that work. This is an attempt to try and use fear to get people to support you. This is straight out of the Trump playbook during a time when he should be trying to distance himself from Donald Trump. So, as CTV News interviewed Frederic Berard here, a law professor at the University of Montreal, is also concerned with the way the clause is being used and says there is no stopping future federal governments from using it to change laws on anything from LGBT equality rights and abortion. Quote, I'm a bit concerned, frankly, and I hope that citizens will be concerned as well, because there's no democracy that is not built on the real and strong rule of law. If it's so easy for politicians to reverse a decision from the Supreme Court, then we're going to have big problems. This is the issue with using the notwithstanding clause. It, for nearly 40 years, it was not touched. So I'll get to the history of it in a second, because you may be wondering, why does this even exist? Why is there even an ability to undermine the charter? But as they write here, for nearly 40 years, most governments refrained from using the charter override. This is no longer the case. In recent years, several provincial governments have used or attempted to use the clause. So I want to be clear. This will be the first time that a federal government has used this. Up to this point, only provincial governments have used it, and they've used it in Ontario at least a few times under Doug Ford. But prevent education workers from striking, ban provincial government employees from wearing religious symbols, prevent trans youth from using their chosen names and pronouns in schools, and limit third-party political spending ahead of elections. If governments can use the charter to override without consequence, they won't hesitate to do so time and time again. If our rights and freedoms can easily be overridden, our charter is meaningless. This is why this is such a problem. The fact that it wasn't used for so long, and over the past 5 years we have seen it used over and over again, shows you as once the door is opened, governments will not hesitate to continue trying to use it. So the history here, why this even exists at all. So again, I'm going to link to the Canadian Civil Liberties Association below the video, as I do with all my sources, but just to let you know, if you want more information on the notwithstanding clause, they have a great breakdown of it here. But in 81, the early stages of our charter's development, the federal government, Ontario and New Brunswick, supported the entrenchment of a national charter of rights, while the remaining provinces opposed entrenchment in favor of giving lawmakers the last word. Section 33, the notwithstanding clause, was seen as a way of solving the deadlock. So that's why it was brought in. Quote, the sole purpose of the notwithstanding clause was only for those exceptionally rare circumstances when a province wanted to bring in a specific benefit or program provision for a part of their population, people of a certain age, for example, that might have seemed discriminatory under the charter. Quote, the clause was designed to be invoked by legislatures in exceptional situations and only as a last resort after careful consideration. It was not designed to be used by governments as a convenience or as a means to circumvent proper process. It is just amazing to see Pierre Poilievre claim to be so concerned about government overreach. I mean, he's referred to Justin Trudeau as a authoritarian, as a socialist, and he's just using his powers as, or uses powers as prime minister just to override the rights of Canadians. Yet Trudeau never even brought up the idea of using the notwithstanding clause in a situation like this. Meanwhile, here's Pierre Poilievre campaigning on getting around Canadians' rights. This gets to the reaction from both Mark Carney and Jagmeet Singh. First, I'll just share the quote from Jagmeet Singh here. He says, quote, it's wrong to do so in terms of using the notwithstanding clause. I'm worried it's becoming more and more commonplace that the notwithstanding clause is being used. And here is Mark Carney.
Pierre Poilievre announced today he would use the notwithstanding clause to push through his tough on crime agenda. Is there any case you'd invoke the clause to override the charter?
I think this is a very dangerous step. We have a Charter of Rights and fundamental freedoms in this country, and it's the responsibility, in my view, of the Prime Minister, of the Government of Canada to defend that charter, those fundamental rights and responsibilities and liberties that Canadians enjoy. Politicizing certain issues with respect to fundamental rights is a slippery slope that leads to further politicization. Being tough on crime, and being tough starts with being smart on crime. And it includes being tough on guns and gun violence. And I note that with regret that Mr. Poilievre has voted against every single gun control measure during his very long career as a career politician and member of the House of Commons. I think it's over 200 times.
So I think this is a strong response from Mark Carney, but, you know, of course we expect this response. What I think is even more telling is the fact that Jagmeet Singh has been very clear about his opposition to the use of the notwithstanding clause. And I'm mentioning that because Jagmeet Singh is bleeding, the NDP are bleeding all their support to the Liberal Party, essentially. So it doesn't politically benefit him to attack Pierre Poilievre, but he's concerned about the rights of Canadians. And this is an issue that he is principled on and has been consistent on. And it shows you how deceptive Pierre Poilievre is when he claims to care about Canadian rights and protections and government overreach, and then does the most clear government overreach you can possibly advocate for. It is absolutely wild, and Canadians should be aware of how dangerous this is.